What's good? It's your boy Fanon. Saw a very good interview this evening by Marcus Vieira, I think it's Marcus Vieira, and Eddie Hearn. And Eddie Hearn said some things I thought were pretty interesting about a fight card that he thinks that he would like to see, provided some, certain things happen. And that would be a fight card that included Jermall Charlo versus Brook, and Jermall Charlo versus Danny Jacobs. And he also talked about how he thought that Danny Jacobs had taken the soul. The police are looking for Danny Jacobs for stealing Jermall Charlo's soul when they had that confrontation in the back hallway after the Deontay Wilder Luis Ortiz fight. So, and also another statement that was made where Eddie Hearns mentioned that Jermall Charlo called him the new Don King. I'd also heard a lot of people ask me what I thought about whether or not Bob Arum was the new Bob Arum. And I thought that he looks a little bit like Don King, like a split between the two. He's definitely his own man, but anyway, so I'll talk about that. First, before I say that and get into the meat of the conversation, please subscribe to hit the bell icon so that we can have discussions in the live streams. Definitely, like I'm pretty much saying every video, I'm trying to push more and more subscribers, or invite more and more subscribers to the live streams. And the best way to know that they're coming about is to hit the bell icon, subscribe and hit the bell icon. And that way you can know when we're going to hold the live stream, when the conversations are going to take place around this subject and other boxing subjects, for true, and it's a live stream for mature boxing nerds. People that really like to talk about the ins and outs of boxing, all the different aspects, from the technical aspects to the matchups, the political things that go on, the upcoming fights, historical fights, all those type of things that that serious avid boxing fans like to talk about. We do them in the live streams, and we do them in a way where it's we try to be as respectful as we possibly can. There's no trolling going on in there. If there's even a moderate amount of trolling, we immediately try to handle it so that everybody feels comfortable sharing their opinions and, having a really good conversation. So with that, please hit the bell icon so that you can be part of that conversation when we have them. Now, on to these three subjects. The first one being this Eddie Hearn saying that Danny Jacobs stole the soul out of Jermall Charlo when they got together. And, I got my thoughts on that. It was, I didn't see that. I definitely saw Danny Jacobs walk up on him, and then what I saw was Jermall Charlo just didn't move. Jermall Charlo stayed in the same position he was, up against a wall, kind of dead-eyed him. He didn't get all aggressive and jump in the guy's face. And Danny Jacobs was, definitely wasn't shy about it. Got in there, said his two-piece, and he should. Rightfully so he did, because Jermall Charlo, it might have been Jermall or Jermall Charlo, were doing, that talking about, where's he at? Where's he at? We're in your hometown. The day before got real, kind of loud and animated about it. But I think that was Jermall Charlo and Jermall Charlo were together. Somebody in the comment section correct me if I'm wrong. However, Jermall Charlo just kind of stayed up against the wall. I know a lot of people thought that Danny Jacobs had punked him. But, my take on it is I don't think that would affect the fight at all, because Jermall Charlo is definitely one of these really froggy dudes. I don't think he has any problem getting in the ring with Danny Jacobs. Now, to have Eddie Hearn say that he would like to see that, like to make that bout, hey, man, that would be really good to see. And I think as actually a subscriber that donated to the super chat and asked me to make a video about it. So, I'm definitely going to do that. And this is, that's exactly why I wanted to make sure that I made this video, because a lot of times people give, when they do super chats in a live stream, or they ask me to make a video on a subject, I'll go ahead and do. And this is one of the matchups that people, wanted to hear about. So it's very good. It's a positive thing that Eddie Hearn made a mention of this fight potentially happening. Now, before he said that, though, this is Eddie Hearn, so we're talking about what he's saying out of one side of his neck. So when he said that out of one side of his neck, and when the other side of the neck started talking, he mentioned that, the fight that Danny Jacobs really wants is the rematch with Gennady Golovkin. And or the winner of the Gennady Golovkin-Canelo Alvarez bout. Personally, I don't see that. I think that's going to be a hard thing to make, especially since Gennady Golovkin's trainer, Abel Sanchez, said if this fight with Canelo Alvarez falls through, then what they want is Billy Joe Saunders. And Billy Joe Saunders is a terrific fighter. I can't say that I think that Billy Joe Saunders is any kind of weak link at 160 because I don't think he is. His performance against David Lemieux was exceptional. I don't know. I mean, he just had beautiful footwork, man. That dude looked. That was one of my favorite fights to watch, just from the defensive aspect of it and the athleticism that Billy Joe Saunders showed. But however, admittedly though, that's against David Lemieux, so David Lemieux got his feet in bricks. So in cement. So I'm not sure what that's going to mean when Billy Joe Saunders gets in there with somebody else. But that said, that looks like the type of angle that Gennady Golovkin might look for in his next fight if justice is served and the fight against Canelo Alvarez is suspended or fined or some way has to go through, or the WBC, the WBA, and the Nevada State Athletic Commission really has to go through an in-depth investigation of what went on with that computerol, what went on with that, the whole the supposedly tainted meat. Go and find out exactly where he bought the meat, all that type of stuff that is necessary into having a thorough investigation. But Danny Jacobs also, I do believe, said the same thing or alluded to it about trying to fight for money, and that's, looking for the big money fights, and that's why he moved. He signed it, with HBO or whatever. I think Jermall Charlo might have been, taken that as him trying to move away from Jermall Charlo and really not wanting it. But, I think Jermall Charlo's looking for the same thing in the WBC position, trying to get, the winner of Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin. Pretty much the whole, I think I said welterweight. I meant middleweight. The whole middleweight division has pretty much got their eyes on Canelo Alvarez, for monetary reasons, and that's, obvious reasons. And then Gennady Golovkin, because Gennady Golovkin holds all the belts except for the WBO. So if for some reason those things didn't happen, I would love to see a Danny Jacobs, Jermall Charlo bout. Personally, I would favor Jermall Charlo in that fight. Punk, whether dude got punked or didn't get punked, I think Jermall Charlo is I think he's an exceptional athlete. He's very hungry. He's got very, very heavy hands, and he just looks like a very, very solid fighter and a very dangerous fighter. Now, I think that Danny Jacobs is, about the same thing, right? He's got a lot of power. He's an experienced boxer. He boxes very well. He looked very heavy-handed and he looked very strong in the last fight that he had against Luis Arias. I think Luis Arias tried to stay away from a good bit because I think he was maybe been a little bit of an undersized 160-pounder, but still, Danny Jacobs looked very, very solid in that fight. Danny Jacobs to date has probably given, I think Canelo Alvarez won the Gennady Golovkin fight, but you take the Canelo Alvarez, that first draw out of there, and Danny Jacobs, definitely showed he can handle his business by performing that well against Gennady Golovkin. Now, like I said, who I would pick in that, I would pick Jermall Charlo, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we went either way, and I would be a very, very excited if I woke up on Monday morning and went to the news feeds and found out that they decided to actually make this fight. Now, interestingly enough, on the undercard though, or the other match that Eddie Hearn talked about when he said that he thought it would be a really terrific matchup was Jermall Charlo versus Brook. That, my friend, I do not think would be a good fight. I don't think it would be a safe fight. I don't necessarily even want to see that fight, but that would be a career ender, in my opinion, for Brook. If Brook had them difficulties with Errol Spence Jr., I do not see him faring any better against Jermall Charlo. Now, while Jermall Charlo is not the tenacious body puncher that Errol Spence Jr. is, I think that he is at least from what he's shown in the ring, he just transitioned into a knockout puncher, to a guy that is going in there to attack and take the fight to his opponent. And I think that in large part is because of the training that he's going through with Derrick James. However, prior to that, when he was with Ronnie Shields, he was in a lot of ways a boxer. So Jermall Charlo, in my opinion, has both sides of the spectrum. He has the ability to box, and he has the ability to go out there and try to hurt you. And ultimately, Jermall Charlo, because of that, might wind up being the better of the two Charlo brothers. Jermall Charlo, if people don't know, is the bigger one with the lion on his chest, and Jermall Charlo is, obviously not a lot smaller, but he's the guy that's still 154 pounds. And I do believe he's the WBC. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that he is the, matter of fact, you know what? I'm going to check this in the midst of the video because I got to tell you something that bugs me is getting corrections in, getting all these doggone corrections in the comment section where people act like, how dare you not remember exactly who is this and that? Like, shoot, there's a lot of fighters out there. Yeah, but Jermall Charlo is the WBC. He's a WBC champion. And I don't necessarily see right up. I think these ratings might be a little low, but Jermall Charlo is a WBC champion. So, I think that it would be fun to see the Charlos both on the same card. But seeing as, this is Eddie Hearn, and I'm going to transition into this whole concept, this whole thing about whether or not he's the new Don King. No, he is not the new Don King. He is not the new Bob Arum. Eddie Hearn is Eddie Hearn. And Eddie Hearn is his own unique. He is just Eddie Hearn. He is the one and only Eddie Byrne, Fast Eddie. He is not Don King. And honestly, before I get into that comparison, let me just finish this up with Jermall Charlo. Jermall Charlo, he stops Brook. Brook is trying to think that he moving up to 154 pounds is all of a sudden his problem's going to be solved. No, it's not going to be. Because now instead of being the bigger guy, squeezing down and getting in there with guys, now you're going to be the smaller guy who fighting guys that are squeezing down, younger guys that can squeeze down to 154 pounds, who are animals. And Jermall Charlo is an animal, just like Errol Spence Jr. was one. And Brook, them chocolate brownies, man, he gonna eat them chocolate brownies, dog. God, dog, who the hell says chocolate brownies? Anyway, no on that one. But if Eddie Hearn was able to make these cards, a Jermall Charlo versus Danny Jacobs, or Jermall Charlo versus Brook, honestly, I would be super psyched for that card, because that would be a Don King card. Don King, as much as what people say about him, and this is why I'm saying Eddie Hearn is not a Don King. There's certain things and certain characteristics that I would associate with Don King that Eddie Hearn, and I've said this in different live streams, Eddie Hearn does have some things in common with Don King. And Eddie Hearn said that he respected Don King and said that he thought Don King is like what happened to all the real promoters, somebody that was willing, to really try to, do their best to promote a fight, to sell a fight, right? They're talking about the salesmanship of the fight. That I do think that Eddie Hearn and, I don't think he's up there with Don King in this regard. Well, in that regard, he may be. Because Eddie Hearn, man, I mean, seriously, man, the dude is a personality in and of itself. He does a good job of being in a lot of ways. And this is just in a little bit of time that I've experienced him dealing in the fights that he's been in the U.S. And since I really started paying attention to him specifically, he is able to put that, put the bad guy hat on and create a lot of stir, create a lot of controversy. He's willing to say a lot of things, talk out the side of his neck, all those type of things where, Don King was the same way, but Don King was different in that Don King made good fights. Don King wasn't playing around with, definitely not in the heavyweight division. Don King, the first fight that Don King came aboard, I mean, Don King has just been with significant fight after significant fight after significant fight, and even his cards, even Don King's undercards are legendary. The fights, not just the fights that you see, headlining, but Don King is the type of guy that would put on a show. Don King is the type of guy that would put on a show where you could show up and you could watch the cards way down the list, and he'd be willing, and it would be an excellent situation to watch. You know what I mean? Where I'm not so sure about guys like where if Eddie Hearn is really willing to risk his best fighters. So, for example, if Deontay Wilder, if Eddie Hearn, if Anthony Joshua was with Don King, I don't think there would be any question about whether or not. I don't think there'd be any question about whether or not you'd see the fight with Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua. I think those dudes would. I think it would be on and popping with Don King. Now, Don King might be in your corner when you enter the ring and leave with the other guy when you lose, but still, the fights would happen. I mean, countless great fights with Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield. I think he also promoted Julio Cesar Chavez. Just going through the list of cats he's promoted: Aaron Pryor, Bernard Hopkins, Ricardo Lopez, Felix Trinidad, Terry Norris, Azuma Nelson, Mike McCallum, Meldrick Taylor, Marco Antonio Barrera, and the clown, Ricardo Mayorga. The dude just put on fight after fight after fight. I have not seen that yet out of Eddie Hearn. So, long and short of it is Eddie Hearn's got to earn his way. He's got to do a little bit more to be the new Don King. He's got to steal some more. Now, as far as taking money out of people's pockets, I hope Eddie Hearn does not follow suit. But as far as making great cards and making fights that people want to see, I have not seen him up there with Don King yet. That is what he has in common with the making of the fights, the cards. From what I have seen, he's got a lot more in common with Bob Arum. Really trying to focus on making in-house fights, protecting his fighters against, guys that could be dangerous and who are not signed with him. And, basically making, trying to make the long buck, where I think the long buck being, making sure he has a fighter fight, a bunch of fights that he can win. He did put Anthony Joshua in with Vladimir Klitschko, a 41-year-old, almost 42-year-old Vladimir Klitschko, who had been, and these are the words of Carl Froch, somebody who has the same trainer, I do believe, as Anthony Joshua. So, in quoting Carl Froch, I think it's safe that this is a safe opinion, and it's not somebody that just wants to talk bad about Anthony Joshua. Dude hadn't fought in 18 months, coming off a loss, 42 years old. Not wanting to not really pushing for the Deontay Wilder fight, trying to push that out. That's more Bob Arumish. You know what I mean? That's more Bob Arumish. But if it is possible that he could put on a card like the one he's talking about, at least the one he mentioned, with Jermall Charlo, Danny Jacobs, Jermall Charlo, and Kell Brook, and they were all on the same card with one or two other good undercards, hey man, that is a Don King type of fight. And hey man, I would take my hats off to him for that. And hopefully he does in a lot of ways start to emulate Don King as far as making quality fights. And with that, I'm out.